and welcome to this webinar on mission-minded money management. I am Roy Harriman with Ministry Pacific, and we will be joined in just a moment by Brook Maturo, Executive Director of the Admin Hub. This webinar is a free service of Ministry Pacific. We provide webinars and numerous other free resources for our clients. One, because we want to help you succeed, but we also want to equip you to reduce and prevent risk. Ministry Pacific is an insurance broker, and we are exclusively committed to serving churches and nonprofit organizations. So we're not insurance agents, and we're not an insurance company. As a broker, we're free to research the market and find the coverage that is best for you, and then you get to decide. So we're here to serve, and please take us up on our offer of a free consultation. Without delay, I want to introduce Brook Maturo. She is the founder and executive director of the Admin Hub. She was raised in Hawaii, went to college in Florida, met her husband in Ukraine, and now lives in San Francisco. She served with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship for 10 years and with the Underground Network for 6 years. And in both of those environments, she saw a strong need for administrative support in ministry. She began the Admin Hub in 2009, and it now serves organizations throughout the United States and internationally. Brook, thanks for sharing your time with us today.
Great. Happy to be here. Thanks.
I know that was a very concise introduction. So tell us a little bit more about what you do and why.
So the Admin Hub, my original vision was kind of to be a nest to launch ministries. It grew out of our experiences in church planting and seeing stressed out church planters and people kind of trying to get new creative ministries off the ground that couldn't hire an executive pastor or a full-time CFO, but still needed some expert advice and direction. So that's really what we do. A lot of it is spreadsheets, but a lot of it is also relationships. And that's why I do what I do, is the relationships with the ministry, getting to be a small part of what God's doing in a handful of different places and contexts. And yeah, just meeting amazing people and being part of what they're doing and relieving their stress. I kind of see it as a pastoral ministry to people in ministry. And practically speaking, it serves as a way for us to live and raise our family in San Francisco, where we experiment with different kind of incarnational and small ministry models.
I think what you just described, that a lot of organizations, they have some semblance of organization, but they do not have necessarily high-level staff or administrative support. A lot of them are in that kind of area of tension in the middle. You noted that you saw how faith-based organizations could benefit from administrative support. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the needs you've observed and continue to observe?
Sure. And I think inevitably money stresses people out, right? It's just inevitably stressful, especially new ministries. You never seem to have enough. You're stretched thin. A lot of church planters are leaning on key volunteers or a spouse or someone who is maybe willing, but doesn't have the resources and support that they would need to do a really good job. And then when it comes down to making a decision about hiring someone or about taking on a new mission project to support or something like that, they don't have the information that they need to make those critical decisions. And really, it's an act of worship. Your people are offering you their hard-earned funds and giving that freely and joyfully. So the sacred calling of being in the trenches day by day and using that well just seemed to be a big need that I saw. And there weren't a lot of options for small ministries. I mean, you have the volunteer option. You maybe had someone in your church who was a CPA, but spread really thin, just wanted to see the numbers and then provide guidance. Executive pastors and CFOs are highly professional and well paid for good reason, which is kind of overkill for a smaller ministry. So yeah, just really saw the need for something. It was modeled after something that was being done in Seattle called the Church Network Hub that provided outsourced and other kind of in the trench resources. And also saw a lot of creative ministry models. social enterprises that are trying to mix ministry with business models that didn't look like the traditional church, and understanding how to say yes to that, but also make it financially sustainable. Sorting through donor systems and how to implement that. There's just a lot out there that really led me to think a person that would walk through those options and find out what was best for that particular ministry was going to be a really good niche to be in.
Yeah, even just one of those challenges that you mentioned, it could be overwhelming to a small organization or even, a larger organization. Let's look at an idea that you shared that was, I think, very intriguing. And I mentioned when we were discussing yesterday that I even received some responses from people about this. And that is, you advocate using finances to tell a story. And often in my church experience, spreadsheets are passed out, but I really don't understand what the columns mean. And I'm just trusting that everyone's being honest. But you have some thoughts about actually engaging people in understanding the financial component of the church by using a story. Can you tell us what you mean by that, and perhaps maybe some examples of how you've seen that done?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, this is something I learned with working with a CPA during an audit of one of our organizations, and I've really pressed in the last couple of years to understanding this. I think a lot of times you will, and I do love spreadsheets. I do think they're the key to solving most problems. So I'll just qualify that. But I also know that sometimes you can get a spreadsheet and kind of get glossed over. So a lot of times, or you just get numbers in a bulletin. This is what we've brought in, and this is what we spent. This is our shortfall. And those are helpful. But I think stepping back and looking at what your main financial indicators say about your organization. That's what I mean about telling a story. So take a profit and loss called a statement of activity. A lot of times organizations will kind of fixate on having a balanced budget, that what we bring in is what we spend. And there's definitely value to that. But there could also be value in, hey, we have a huge cash reserve. We're going to budget for a loss and invest in some growth so that next year we can see a stronger, a net gain or something like that. Or your budget might be balanced, but your cash is low or restricted, or you have a lot of debt. So really kind of understanding what those numbers mean and what it says about your organization. I think alongside that is, does your budget, balance sheet, and reports reflect what you are saying you value and what your vision is? If your vision and your priority is global missions, are you budgeting for that? Are you valuing that when it comes down to making financial decisions? So those are the kinds of things that I'm talking about when you talk about telling a story, that it's not as cut and dry as having money in the bank and a balanced budget, that there are ups and downs. I know one church I worked with had some giving patterns that were reduced, and they didn't quite understand it because it seemed like they had the same amount of people as they always did, and come to find out that a lot of those people were facing some financial hardship, and they had to bump up their benevolence ministry when they went and reached out to specific people. So stepping back, looking at patterns, understanding what a balance sheet or a P&L or a budget report is telling us is important. Even just the way, a lot of times as churches, it's tempting to say, hey, we have to keep the lights on and pay our staff, which at the baseline is true. If you don't do those things, you end up in trouble. But are you framing it in a way that if we have this space that God's provided and we're providing resources to make that a nice space, how does that open our doors to the community? Or if we have a decision about hiring, what kind of staff do we want to hire and how do we want to deploy them for kingdom purposes? So it's really just a reframing of what those numbers say.
At the church I attend here I live in Missouri, I know our pastor is really good about very frequently saying, thank you for your giving as a result of your giving. And then one of the things is that X number of people in the community have been served meals through the food pantry. So thank you for your faithful giving. And so he's illustrating it isn't just dollars that are going into a bank account. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Absolutely. Sometimes it's tempting to just talk about money when it's budgeting season or year-end giving or that kind of thing. But incorporating it in a natural way where you're telling stories about things that staff are doing or what missions that you've supported. And I mean, we raised support for 15 years with InterVarsity. And so really had to learn this lesson that people give to things that they value and are inspired by and that they feel good about. So, framing it in that way. So you're not just paying bills, but you are really leveraging these tithes and offerings for something much bigger than even the people in the congregation.
I would be interested in your perspective on this. I know I worked in church communications for a number of years, and sometimes a pastor could say, "Well, we already talked about that," as if talking about finances and casting a vision for where you're giving makes a difference is really something that you do once or maybe every 5 years. It seems like it's something that requires more persistent communication and perhaps even more creative communication than some of your more operational details.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Especially if you work to make it a natural part of ministry, a natural thing that you're communicating about, so that it's not weird to talk about. People don't
Hmm.
have the awkward conversation at the end of every fiscal year about making budget or that kind of thing. They're just used to hearing that this is part of what we do. This is part of how we're releasing funds for the kingdom, and the communication piece, I think, is big.
This is something that is routinely done in business, and not that we want to be a business. Public companies have their calls with investors, and they're not just sharing numbers. They're obviously saying, well, this is what we're working towards. This is our goal. And so it seems like in some ways that's really what we're trying to continue to tell people. This is our goal. This is what we're working for. And sometimes we may be under the assumption that, well, everyone knows what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely agree with that. That it is we can learn from the business world. It's not a business, but we do have to keep the bills paid, and there is a peace, I think, in a congregation when they know that the finances are well taken care of.
Hmm.
Um, so definitely kind of learning about that and being transparent in the way that funds are being used.
We may have a natural reluctance to talk about finances, but as you mentioned, Brooke, if it's really integrated into part of who we are and what we do, then it's not, as you said, an awkward end of year conversation.
Yeah, and I think having an atmosphere where you are open to questions. Us finance people tend to get a little defensive sometimes if we get questions about things, but really fostering that sense of this is an open book. This is what we've tried to do. It might be imperfect, but really listening to people and their questions and addressing things from there.
Brooke, that leads us, I think, very logically into another topic, and that is the ministry of working with finance, of church finances. It's obviously critical. The scriptures talk a lot about handling money. Jesus talked a great deal about handling money. But on a practical level, it's often unrewarding because people only notice when something goes wrong. So, in your experience, how can the ministry of working with finances, both as staff and volunteers, become more of a routinely encouraging and rewarding task for either a staff member or a volunteer?
Absolutely. That is definitely something that I experience where I don't get calls from my clients unless something goes wrong.
Yeah.
So it can feel a little bit like the silent partner when everything's going smoothly and everything's kind of at status quo. It can be unrewarding and unseen. But I think again, this culture of transparency and openness and discussing, making it part of ministry. I mean, just saying thank you to to staff and appreciating it. And again, listening to people's concerns, which I think are often behind the question, if that makes sense. We all bring baggage and our history with money to any conversation. And so sometimes the most cantankerous and hostile questioners also may have a good point buried back there, and to handle that with wisdom and grace. And I think not a lot of times I'll talk with administrative assistants in churches, and they just feel like everyone just piles things on them, and doesn't really listen to them or involve them in decision making, when often they see, the real nitty gritty, what's really happening behind the scenes. And so valuing that voice and that perspective can be very, very helpful to people, especially if you have volunteers working in admin stuff, and asking, hey, what do you need to do your job better and easier and, streamline, that kind of thing can also be helpful in making that a rewarding role.
It's exciting to see, how people have different gifts and talents. And some people, they don't really fit with children. They don't really fit with student ministry. They might be introverted enough that they're not going to be a greeter, but you put them on an administrative job and they just come alive. And of course, a lot of finance related jobs have to do with administration and details. To affirm people who are working in that area, whether they're staff or volunteers, that's a great idea.
I love it when people actually read the reports that I send out and ask questions. I get excited, or even catch a mistake. I was a disaster at teaching Sunday school, so a room of children just scare me to death. But so this is my gifting. But when I send out a report and there's crickets and silence, sometimes that can be disheartening. So responses to admin people, and questions about their reports, and hey, I didn't understand this, and that kind of stuff kind of shows that you're valuing and reading what they're sending out.
A related question, and this is impromptu, so don't want to catch you unprepared. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about the importance of training for ministry staff and volunteers who work in finances? Obviously, there are a lot of things that are similar between the business world and accounting and the nonprofit world, but then there are a lot of things that are a lot different. Do you have any thoughts on the importance of empowering people through training?
Yeah, I'm a big believer. Even if someone has bookkeeping experience or business experience, that it's super important to understand some of the quirks and ins and outs of recording donations, making sure designated donations are recorded correctly, dating donations. California has a couple quirks about state and county tax exemptions, property exemptions, nonprofit status, that kind of thing. So I'm really a big fan of train your volunteers so that they can function from a place of feeling competent, and not just scared that they're going to do something. I do a lot of coaching for part-time or volunteer administrative folks, and a lot of times they're just like up at night worrying the IRS is going to come after them, which means that they are a devoted and conscientious volunteer. It's super unlikely. You don't want your people functioning out of fear. So if you can provide them training, that's super helpful.
I think the goal, at least the goal should be for people in church and nonprofit leadership, is they don't necessarily want to be the smartest person in the room. Particularly with finances, there are so many categories and subcategories and changes, tax law, reporting, IRS statements to donors, that to educate and train volunteers and just have a team of a half dozen people who are educated and excited and want to know more would be a great asset to any ministry. Just stepping back just a little bit, Brooke, you mentioned that sometimes we don't hear from anybody unless something goes wrong. So sometimes the questions that can be brought up, whether in a public or private setting, they may come, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but they may come from a bit of a grumpy kind of perspective. And I think basically what you're alluding to is someone may have had a bad experience with a church or with church finances or nonprofit finances in the past, and we may be caught off guard because what have we done to earn someone's distrust? Yet I think what you're saying is it's an opportunity to unpack. It may seem like a hostile question, but it's an opportunity to unpack what is really behind that question. Before we debate, maybe we have to find out which question we're really trying to answer. Is that kind of the direction you were going with that?
Yeah. So for example, I feel like a lot of churches have the person that challenges every line item in the budget. And so I often encourage pastors and leadership to ask them, is there something important you feel like we're overlooking? Because it's might not be hung up on this. Or is there something about our processes that are concerning you? Or that kind of thing. As I alluded to before, we all kind of bring our baggage to the budgeting process. So kind of giving people to navigate that and valuing the process as much as the product. So you could get a great budget, but in the end, if you alienated a bunch of key leaders or neglected to kind of address the pieces along the way, it might not ultimately be good for your church because the process was really messy and hurtful and that kind of thing. So that's kind of what I'm getting at when I'm talking about, listen to people. There might be something else behind that they don't feel that their voice is being valued or something to that effect.
Do you have any thoughts about how to communicate a significant financial decisions, maybe like in bits and pieces instead of here is the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, and this is one of the fruits of having strong and stable administrative processes is that you have that time and luxury. If your finances aren't in order, if there's, a week to go before your congregational meeting and you're just throwing together a budget, you don't have the luxury of that. But if you're starting a few months ahead of time, I definitely encourage conversations with key leadership, talk to your children's ministry, ask what they need, talk to the worship ministry, ask what they need to, talk to the different stakeholders ahead of time and see get a sense of the pulse of where people are at. You're never going to make everybody happy, and there's never going to be enough money to do everything that everybody wants. But you're helping people to be heard, and you're helping people feel, again, that sense of ownership and investment in the process, even if maybe they didn't get all the money budgeted they wanted or that kind of thing. So, involving your key leaders early, having those conversations, having a little breathing space to go through the process so that if you have a model in which that's presented to either elders or a board or the congregation, most of the key people there are not going to be hit with surprises.
You have shared that key components of a fruitful financial ministry are to keep it simple, involve multiple people, and tell a story. We've talked a little bit about some of these things. What more can you tell us about keep it simple, involve multiple people, and tell a story?
Hey, for keep it simple, I mean, kind of avoid lobbing spreadsheets and accounting speak at people. It tends to shut people down. I'm a big fan of developing a contextualized one-page financial summary that summarizes, key metrics in your statement of activity and statement of financial position. This is what we have in the bank. This is what we've gotten. This is what we've spent on these 3 major categories. This is what we've given away in compassion ministry, whatever that looks like, so that that can really be tracked, and that your finance people are not using a lot of vocabulary that sounds complicated. I think it can be a pitfall that finances are so complicated that only a select few can understand them. And then, yeah, like we've talked about, involving multiple people. The process is just as important as the product. You have a balanced budget and, your 3 to 6 month operating reserve in the bank, but a lot of people who feel left out or disgruntled, that's going to be difficult. And that's how a ministry is run with a lot of different perspectives. And then, yeah, we talked a little bit about telling a story, attaching a narrative to that one-page summary or to any numbers that you give people. Hey, giving is up 10% over this time last year, and we're really thankful for that. Or we have concerns that our cash balance is a certain amount less than this time last year. Highlight 2 to 3 points in narration that can help frame the mood and the tone of those numbers, because that's not going to be intuitive to a lot of people.
The stories, sometimes we think of annual reports, which definitely should be interesting and exciting, but there are stories on a continual basis that we can relate to how giving or sound management of funds is is making a difference. So
the example that I often run it up against is a ministry that has had a season of transition and growth. So there's a huge net loss. They've spent more than they've brought in. But you attach the story that, look, hey, last year we ended with a $50,000 overage. And so our commitment this year was just to give that away, or invest in a new worship staff, or something like that, so that it's not just a big red negative number. It's in context of multiple years of ministry, and drawing on a lot of the resources. Yeah, we have a big, good, strong balance sheet. Excited about that. Does that mean that we're hanging on with too tight of hands, and then we need to do more of outreach, or something to our building? Think creatively about how we're spending our funds.
on the negative side, you've been able to observe a lot of organizations, a lot of churches. What are some common pitfalls that you see when it comes to managing church and nonprofit finances?
Sure. I mean, sadly, I have had a front seat to a lot. Honestly, I think the big one is secrecy and isolation. When you have either a volunteer or employee who is generally a good employee on the front end, but that's the only person opening the mail, that's the only person looking at the bank account, that's the only person with kind of knowledge of the finance, and every time you ask that person, everything's too complicated to really get into. That's when I've seen especially small ministries get in trouble. The EDD doesn't get paid, and all of a sudden you're getting collection notices, or things are being paid for personal expenses, and nobody realized it because no one else is looking at the bank statements, because your finance volunteer or employee said that they have it all taken care of. So definitely you want minimum 2 eyes on all the bank statements, multiple people with access to the accounting system, multiple people opening the mail, that kind of thing. That's what I've seen. And then I think the other piece is complexity, just complexity on a level that's not needed for the size of ministry. Multiple, 10, 12 designated funds for every little thing, making it a real headache to track. Or a super complex donor system when something really streamlined and simple could suffice. Someone somewhere told us to use this, $5,000 a year donor system. It's not working for us, that kind of thing. So those are, I think, some things to be aware of.
Just one other thought regarding the isolated person handling finances is not only is it not fair to the organization, but it's not fair to that person, because if some funds are misused, or at least it appears that they are, then that person doesn't have really a means to defend themselves or to demonstrate that they've been doing the right thing. And so everybody wins, I think, when there's more sunlight coming into the finances.
Absolutely. I always talk to people about demonstrable integrity, especially if you're, in a pastoral role and have any kind of hands in finances, that you want to think in terms of, even if you weren't doing something wrong, if someone accused you of misappropriating funds or something like that, how would you establish that you've had openness and integrity? What's the paper trail? What's the story attached to how things are approved in your church? Can you confidently say multiple people see the bank statements? All of us in ministry are spread thin, but putting some simple things in place so that you are both, like, the ministry staff is protected and the church funds are protected. Both sides, I think, are important. And it really, shows your administrative staff that they are cared for, that you want them to be above reproach and able to prove their integrity if it's questioned for any reason.
It's, I think, our nature to think it can't happen here, but research shows that 1 of 3 churches experience embezzlement, and the one of many problems with embezzlement is the person who commits the crime is the person you would never expect to commit the crime.
Yeah.
And some of the systems that you've talked about can protect organizations from not only loss of funds, but a lot of the times loss of trust, which is much harder to rebuild than it is to repay funds.
Another one of my clients contracted with a payroll company that was not paying their taxes on their behalf to the EDD.
Oh,
even though they were
goodness.
paying the payroll company. And so even just knowing, hey, this is the website to check to make sure that they're getting paid, this is where you can look to make sure that your IRS payments are being made if you outsource to a company, because in the end, it just hurts your vision and purpose.
Let's switch to what we would essentially prescribe, or what you essentially prescribe. If someone asked you, what does a healthy church financial system look like? How would you respond?
I think there are two things that I really work with my clients to see. I mean, one is an appropriate level of attention to finances. It should absolutely be in the background. I mean, in the foreground is your mission and your people and your ministry. It is possible to pay too much attention to that. But then, of course, not paying attention to it causes stress, causes heartache, causes problems. So I think a healthy system has a good, appropriate level of attention, broad accountability, and transparency. The second thing is that it's manageable. So simple checklists. This is the checklist we go through every month. These are the things that need to be done every quarter. These are the things that be done every year. And so it's part of the organizational culture, and it is doable and feasible, that if you lose one admin person, someone can step in. And there are things like verifying tax payments, multiple people seeing the bank statements in mail, that kind of thing, that are just second nature and can be transferable to anyone, and are doable, even especially for a small church staff or for a small church planning team.
I have one last question,
Mhm.
and then I want to give you an opportunity to improvise. And we have some excellent questions and comments. What we've talked about here, some of the challenges, some of the solutions. Do you have any stories about either financial transformation that you've observed from Weak to Strong, or other stories of related to wise and creative financial management that resulted in real tangible impact?
I'm thinking of a friend of mine who was serving as a pastor in a church, but had just a bigger vision of materials and resources that he could bring around the Asian American story, that kind of released these things to other churches and to the bigger thing. And he felt really kind of squelched in the church pastor role that he was in. Their heart was local, and he kind of had a bigger vision. And so we worked with him. We got him his own 501c3. He explored creative funding. He has a board that's really committed to keeping him accountable. And so now he can work exclusively at the ministries called Kingdom Rice on things that he loves, doing publishing and speaking at different churches, and kind of bringing what God's called him to do into a model that works with him. So I love that kind of creative thinking of, like, if I don't fit in the church, what am I supposed to do? And so that's been sustainable for him and his family, which has been exciting. I was also thinking of one of my clients called Extolo. It was a construction professional who just went to visit Haiti after the big earthquake in 2010, and had a heart to start a construction company for Haitians to build safer homes. And when I came on board with them, I think it was 2018, they were paying big bucks to a CPA to do all of their bookkeeping and accounting. And they were really trying to streamline as an organization. And so I said, well, you have these great professionals down in Haiti. Let's train them to do some of the bookkeeping and then just provide oversight. And so we've trained a whole international bookkeeping team, where the Haiti team keeps most of their own books. I provide oversight, feedback, prepared financial statements. But it's not only saved them a lot of money, it's also kind of empowered some really gifted people in Haiti to be administrative professionals in a ministry. So things like that really kind of excite me. Another one of the ministries here in the city, called Old School Cafe, they employ at-risk youth to run their restaurant. And when I started with them in 2017, they had just bought this building. They were in debt. The founder had to float payroll a couple times, and we just kind of took a couple years to pound the pavement, work our tails off, get funding. Now we have a paid off building and a bigger staff and a cohort of youth, and have made some really big impacts in that part of the city. So it's been really a privilege to walk through a lot of ministries through those difficult times, and then to see the the fruitful times and what that sense of peace and empowerment brings.
I do want to just capture a few of these questions. Rinki asks, any suggestions about donor impact reports?
I'm reading that as kind of like what good your donations have done.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it comes back to telling the story of your ministry. How many people have you fed at the food bank? How many children have you? Numbers speak to people. It's not everything, but that connecting because of what you've given, this many people were impacted, or this part of the community, or we started this new thing. Putting stories to that. I don't know, Rinki, if you want to elaborate on what you mean by the donor impact report.
Nonprofits are really good about producing those. Churches really don't, not that it's never done, but they don't do it as much. And yet they have great stories also to tell. They may be talking about baptisms, mission trips, their food pantry. But there is news to share, even on a small scale. And let me see here if
something to be encouraged about their giving and help them see the fruit. Yeah, I think definitely both, numbers can be helpful. Numbers can increase growth or indicate growth. But I think you also want to weave in stories. Ministries can go through several years of not numerical growth, but depth growth. And so connecting that to encourage people in what they've given. It could be staff growth. It could be, growth in a particular ministry that maybe people aren't seeing. Focus on the stuff that people aren't seeing. Not everybody comes to youth group. Some churches feel like they're struggling, but they have this fantastic youth group. And I would also encourage, if you're doing like the traditional kind of one-page donor impact, to use visuals. A lot of text, and you probably know this, Roy, from marketing, kind of gets overwhelming. So a donor impact report that includes some kind of visual that tells your story is important.
We also mentioned donor management software, of which there are many, many choices. Rinki asks, do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, there are a ton. My current favorite is something called GiveButter. They don't have a lot of fees associated with them. It's really flexible. It has a lot of options as far as like short-term campaigns, things like that are really helpful. A lot of my churches use Planning Center Giving, which I also really like because it integrates with registration systems, membership databases, that kind of stuff. Another one of my favorites is called Bloomerang. It is pricey, but if you are engaged in a ministry in which you need a lot of CRM, contact relationship management, Bloomerang is really great because it gives you kind of a dashboard of like, hey, here's a donor you should email today, or here's a donor that just gave last night that you should reach out and thank. And it makes that process of fundraising a lot better. So those are the three that I would say. GiveButter is a good bargain. DonorBox is a good bargain too, actually, and really flexible.
And it sounds like the key, Brooke, as you mentioned earlier, is to really, match the complexity of the donor management system to the complexity of your operation. So if you have 100 people, you probably shouldn't get the Fortune 500 level of donor management software, because likely won't even be able to use it.
Yeah, I have seen some kind of really new church plants invest thousands in a, fancy online giving system, when really you could just, use PayPal or Stripe or something super simple, but focus on the relationship, because at the heart, fundraising is relationships. So if you're spending all your time managing a fancy system and not pressing into those relationships, it's probably not as successful as you want it to be.
You can start with the simple, and if it's not meeting your needs, then you can continue to make things more complex and expensive as needed, but you don't have to like start with the Ferrari. I don't know if that's a good example.
Right. No, I think that's a
metaphor.
great example. Yeah, that's a great example. Start with like the simplest thing that meets your needs. I mean, you can track donors in QuickBooks Online, if it's just kind of who's given. And then as you see a need for more complexity, find systems that grow with you.
Well, I want to thank everyone for the excellent questions today. And there are a lot of good ideas have been shared here during this hour. And I encourage you, if you want to learn more about what Brooke is talking about, to get in touch with her. And What is the best way, Brooke, for anyone to reach you and to learn more about your services and to just get some ideas about how you might be able to provide them insights?
Sure. Yeah, the best way is the website, which you've put in the chat, theadminhum.org. There is a contact form where you can send me your phone number, email, let me know what your preferred method of contact is and, question or what kind of thing you're looking for. And I'm happy to reach out as soon as I'm able.
Take Brooke up on this. We always have room to improve in the way that we manage our finances and value the people who are working on our financial teams. Please contact us if we can be of service when it comes to liability and property insurance needs or questions for churches and nonprofits. Consultation is always free. We are brokers, so we can shop the market and look at options and find out what's best for you and then let you decide. You can reach us at ministrypacific.com. Thank you to Brooke and everyone for joining us today, and we will let you get on to a productive Wednesday.